Welcome to the Media Leader Podcast. I'm Jack Benjamin. Earlier this month, Allwyn's global media director, Ross Sargent, announced he would be joining GB News as its chief revenue officer. The appointment comes amid what Sargent has referred to as an inflection point for the company. GB News has cumulatively lost £131.5 million since its inception in 2021, with funding provided by owners Sir Paul Marshall and Dubai-based investment firm Legatum. But losses have been narrowing amid double-digit revenue growth, and audiences have been growing as well. According to Barb figures, GB News has beaten both BBC News and Sky News in average audience and audience share in 7 of the last 8 months. But with growth comes scrutiny, both from us here at the Media Leader and elsewhere in the market. An investigation by Alan Rusbridger at the New World last week found that, quote, GB News has essentially become Reform TV, referring to the far-right political party, while broadcasting regulator Ofcom has, quote, more or less given up the ghost. Not only is GB News regularly airing incendiary and biased political rhetoric that aligns with the Reform Party, including by employing its sitting MPs as presenters, but it's also arguably doing so in contradiction of Ofcom regulations that seemingly aren't being enforced. I wanted to raise all of these topics and more to Sargent. Sargent is being tasked with selling GB News to advertisers here in the UK and in the US, where GB News expanded last year. Many advertisers, particularly larger brands, have been skittish over concerns around brand safety and suitability and the nascent nature of the fledgling broadcaster. This is our conversation. I hope you enjoy. Ross Sargent, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I like to start each of these interviews by asking, first of all, what drew you to a career in the media industry? Mm-hmm. And in your case specifically, from taking you from South Africa, your native South Africa, to London, which you've been in. I'm not actually sure how long you've lived in London now.
2 separate stints, so almost 20 years.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so 20 of the 30 in England.
Gotcha. And so how'd you get started in the industry?
So I was a musician when I was younger. I performed and composed, and I got into Cambridge to study music. And at the time, I went to high school in Cape Town, and Cape Town in December is beautiful and sunny and warm, and England is cold and miserable. Yeah. And the prospect of, a music degree is really serious. It was my passion. I absolutely loved it. But I could also go to the University of Cape Town and study finance, which I also really enjoyed. And most of my friends were going. It was really great. I was obviously 17 at the time, so who doesn't want to have a nice time? And I just really got a huge passion. So the music was supposed to start in the September of the year, and I registered for finance in the January. And by about June, I was completely swallowed in it. And it was a mixture of finance and marketing and investments and general business. And clearly, it was the marketing side that really inspired me. I actually got a job in university selling advertising for the university newspaper, not knowing that might have anything to do with my future. And through that, I started a little PR agency where I got a few clients who advertised in other magazines and things. In those days, a big thing in magazines was trade exchanges. So you would give $100 worth of product for $100 worth of pages, and you get the pages for free. And that's a great thing. So that really went really well. And then when I finished my degree, I did a postgrad in communications and marketing at Red and Yellow's Ogilvy's only school, which is the Red and Yellow School in Cape Town. And it was really, really immersive, very intense. It was a fantastic year, and that just absolutely inspired me for the industry. I did really well in the course. So 1 or 2 of us was taken to particular agencies, and I went to go meet an agency, and we really hit it off. And I started in January of the next year, which was a hot summer's day, dressed in a black and white Calvin Klein jacket suit. The rest wasn't Calvin Klein, just the jacket.
Okay.
And I was all dressed up for the day, imagining Mad Men wasn't on yet, besides imagining the whole Mad Men world and all that kind of thing. And it was an ad agency. They were really cool, very relaxed, summer dresses. And I had to adjust my ultra corporate mentality to an agency. It was an agency of 20, 30 people. I was really lucky because I had a finance degree, that I had a real insight into our biggest clients, which were finance clients. That went really, really well. And then after a year and a half, I ended up moving to Johannesburg to take a job with MEC. And that was my first big media agency job. From then, I went into client-side roles straight away. So I went to Diageo, I went to a bank. I then was the head of media for Diageo in Ireland and in Britain. That went really, really well. I really, really enjoyed that. I think I went back to South Africa and I joined FCB, the ad agency, which was really, really interesting because ad agencies want a different thing from media agencies. Ad agencies want to sell a brilliant piece of film, and that's their core product, which quite frankly, I think as media people, we forget that's that really is their revenue. That's what drives them. We get very frustrated at them when they propose another TV ad, but with all due respect, that's their gold. In all senses of the award gold and the money gold, right. And you got to respect that. So I then moved back to media agencies for a while, and then that's how I got back to Wavemaker in the UK. And then I just found myself at Asahi and Allwyn, which was real highlights because they both had specific, very different challenges, like big challenges. I mean, I think the Asahi one was more about getting the right global thinking through each of the different markets, some of which weren't as advanced as they could be. And then the Allwyn one was a really rapidly growing business that needed to understand particularly the US market and the UK market, which is very, very different to most European markets.
Right.
And that was very, very fun.
It sounds like you haven't worked for a media owner since you were working for your student newspaper.
So I did have a position, 2 positions on boards when I was at my own agency, actually. So I had my own agency in the middle of all of that. And I found two boards. The one was a really nice position. It was a quarterly lunch with the board to give them just some advice, which was great. The other one was monetizing it was a podcast company, actually, that were trying to monetize their software. So I found that really, really interesting. But the thing is, we're a very close, intimate industry. So we're made up of media agencies, media owners, and advertisers. I leave the ad agencies out of that because essentially this is a 3-part conversation. And we're all really close. Like, we all know each other. There are people in media owners, really good ones, who come from media agencies, and vice versa. There's quite a lot of people at clients who used to be media owners. And I think those skills are very transferable.
I mention it because when it was announced that you were going to be moving to GB News, there were sort of 3 questions that came into my head. One is, why work for a media owner?
Yep.
Why change sides? Why specifically a TV media owner? And then why specifically GB News?
Cool. Okay. I can do all those 3. So why a media owner? I have always tried, and I believe I have done this, but I have always tried to be good, nice, and decent to the people that we work with. So as a media agency, and particularly an advertiser, you can sometimes get the misconception, because the money goes in a certain direction, that you are calling the shots. And I remember having a conversation with one of our teams at one of the 3 last companies, who said, we're a really big advertiser. We're very important. We should act like it. And my answer was, well, no, we shouldn't actually, because with the media agency, we're 5%, which is huge, of their book, but they're 20 times bigger than us.
Right.
Then you go from that media agency to the media owner, and they're also 5%, or maybe at best 10% of their own book. And we're going to get a lot more out of people if we genuinely treat them not just with respect, but with humility and kindness, because we want to get something out of the relationship almost more than they do. And it's really, really hard for advertisers sometimes to realize that, and I'll just use the biggest TV channel in the country as an example, we need them more than they need us. They want us, but we desperately, we absolutely do. And working in the right way with them, we launched a thing at Diageo. I launched a thing at Diageo where we had a Media Owner Innovation Awards. So we brought each of the media owners in once a year to give them an award for an innovation they did. In those days, it was newspapers, radio, TV, etc.
Right.
To be able to thank them and congratulate them. And those particular media owners, that's like a person who went back to the company they worked for, which was a very tough environment, with an actual award from a client saying, we actually did brilliant work. And that kind of approach and that kind of strategy really helps. So I suppose it's my long way of saying that I've always admired what they've done. Essentially, the word agency came from sales agency. So newspapers made newspapers, and they hired these sales agents who worked in the word agent on a commission. And for that, they placed the ads. And then eventually, quite quickly, they started saying, well, we'll knock up the ads too. So the entire industry was agents for the media owners. This is all about the media owners. That's what we're here for. And they do fantastic work. So I've been in very global roles for the last 10, 15 years. And there's lots of countries that I love for all different reasons. But I'm particularly proud of this country. So we produce some of the best content in the world. I mean, it's just... I mentioned this the other day, and I know you were there. That
at our Connected TV World Summit event.
Yes. I was watching an ordinary detective series, and Olivia Colman came on in a supporting role. We have this content here which is just brilliant, and there's various reasons why it is able to be produced, but one should be very proud. So I'm very proud of the British media brands that we have, and I just wanted to get involved.
And then why GB News?
So if I go back through every single job I've ever done, except for the one bank, clearly, it's always been a situation where it's either been at an inflection point or it's really needed a lot of input. I would have been bored to death right now going to pretty much what I do, because Allwyn is a massive advertiser globally, not necessarily in every country like the US, but certainly every country in Europe. And it becomes, the next step is another really big advertiser with long-term projects that have got sort of 3-year timelines. And I wanted something that was a challenge. So I had quite a lot of conversations. So some of them were conversations that were sort of what you'd imagine would be less of a challenge, slightly more sort of glorified roles as opposed to really fix something. And I can see a huge opportunity here because they have an audience. They are delivering. They are absolutely growing. So they already have shown the potential of the trajectory. It's not going down, it's going very, very much so up. But they haven't unlocked the perception of the media agencies and the advertisers. And, it's quite strange. So I was trying to explain to somebody the other day that, as media people assume that we know what happened in, a certain publication over the last 6 months. The truth is we might buy it, but we don't read everything. It's not possible. So there is a piece for the media owners to be able to say, listen, this is what we've done, this is what we've changed, this is how we're growing, and we didn't expect you to watch every minute of our show to know that, and that's the job. So it really is the challenge is a classical B2B marketing challenge. I am very confident in the product, and we can talk in detail about that. Mm-hmm. And I'm confident of the story that I bought into that makes a lot of sense to me. And I see that growth as a very, not easy, but when it's done, a very quick trajectory.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you about the business in detail, but I think it's probably best to address the elephants in the room first, because my understanding is the reason why a lot of advertisers and agencies have maybe kept away from GB News aren't necessarily related just to the fact that the audience has taken its time to scale to the point where it is quite large today.
Sure.
And we can get into those numbers, but it's because of the actual content on GB News and the brand safety concerns. So I should note, after we published our piece on your job move, I actually got a text from GB News's communications officer essentially complaining that I referred to GB News as a right-wing channel.
Really?
Which in retrospect, I think is a pretty soft description. An analysis just a couple days before we were recording now of 15 programs on GB News reviewed by more than 20 journalists from across the sort of spectrum, published by Alan Rusbridger in the New World. Mm-hmm. Concluded, quote, GB News has essentially become reform TV. And the reviewers also found that GB News routinely, if not systematically, that's their words, disregards Ofcom requirements. So I'm curious if you saw, I'm sure you saw that report. Yes. What was, first of all, your reaction to that piece of reporting?
So there's that report and there's everything I investigated before I joined. So this was not a blind move at all. And I think it's really important. So I think the issue is around diversity of opinion is an important thing for us. So I, more than anybody else and all of my friends in media, we do tend to operate in a bit of a bubble, our own fairly liberal bubble. And the reality of the situation is that when I go back to my family in Lincolnshire, they're not talking about the same things that we're talking about. The issues that concern a lot of people in the country aren't necessarily the same issues that concern people in London, Manchester, and Birmingham. And I believe that it's absolutely necessary to have differing opinions always represented. And there is a white space in this country. So the main media outlets are a little bit too leaning towards a London, Manchester, Birmingham. We have the same thing in the US and the same thing in Australia, and I know that as a media buyer. And I think it's really important for open debate to allow everybody to say things and to also accept that not a lot of people are going to agree with what I think. And I've got some very strong opinions. I'm gay, I'm married. It's been a tough journey through my whole life. And I've had to try to get my head around not wanting to control the conversation, but to actually listen. And I think we are fooling ourselves, all of us, whatever your leaning might be, if we think that everybody should just be talking about what we think is right and what we think isn't right.
Do you genuinely believe that GB News broadcasts a plurality of opinion on its own channel?
So I believe that GB News has the full intention and gives the opportunity to do that. They're the only channel that broadcast the Liberal Democrats conference last week. No other channel did. They invite all of the other parties on and differing opinions. And I believe quite strongly that they do.
Just to take one potential counterexample of a program, it was presented by a Reform politician, Matt Goodwin, in January. It covered topics including Islamist fighters arriving on small boats, migrant protests in Crowborough. I might be mispronouncing that. Apologies as an American. And also refugee sexual assaults in the Netherlands. To me, that's not necessarily a wide variety of topic areas.
Yeah.
And I would also point to the fact that this is dominating GB News' general cover whenever I've turned the channel on.
Okay, so that bit is quite clear to me. What GB News is committed to is giving a voice to the people in the country who feel that their voice has been taken away. They have an audience. We have an audience. Forgive me, it's 5 days in.
Yeah,
so I'm going to say me as an advertiser sometimes, and they as a media. But we have an audience which is being catered for. The audience is interested in these topics, and they're not being covered in the mainstream media quite as much as these people, the audience, would like to talk about.
You don't think migration is not being covered by mainstream media as a serious issue? I mean, Labour is certainly working to address the problem.
Yeah. I agree that particular topic, but things like the farmers, things like the grooming gangs, they're not being covered quite as much as the audience would like to talk about them. And they want to talk about them, and it's about opinion, and it's about sharing those opinions and giving the community the opportunity to talk about these things that way. So therefore, there is a lot of content by intention, which is the content that the people want. And if I can come back to the reform piece, because that's the key piece, whether you support the Liberal Democrats or Reform or the Greens or any of the other parties, the reality of the polls at the moment is that the Reform Party is leading the polls. And it is very newsworthy, and it's also very interesting to a huge amount of people in the country. It might be true that the seats occupied in Parliament might suggest that you should have Labour and only Conservative, but the polls are suggesting that what people are interested in talking about is other parties.
But surely you'd agree there's a difference between wanting to talk about reform and reform sort of hovering around 30%, give or take, in the polls for a serious amount of time, and actually having reform politicians on to present programs. I mean, do you think it's appropriate for sitting MPs to be presenting? I know there was a whole Ofcom legal issue over this. They're technically current affairs programs,
Correct.
not news programs. That's the legal decision. I know there's going to be, I'm sure Ofcom is looking at different ways to consider rewriting the rules on what is a news program versus a current affairs program, but that's been settled. I mean, I guess there's the normative argument of whether or not you think that's appropriate. And then there's also the argument that you're going to have to deal with in your new job, which is, do you think it's appropriate for an advertiser to pay to advertise on a channel that money is then going into the pockets of sitting politicians?
Sure. Okay. So firstly, let's take that one. So it is a mix of news and opinion and commentary. We all agree, so I can say on behalf of the Ofcom, we absolutely agree in the Ofcom rules around news not being presented by party politics. That's absolutely fine. But having well-known, famous people who either were, or are going to be in politics is really interesting for the viewers. They want it. They generally want it. These are some of the highest rated programs that people actually want to watch. You will have noticed, as you have, that a certain amount of politicians have come forward to do it. That's not to say that there isn't an opening for a wider variety of politicians to come do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but surely you don't actually think that other politicians from other parties are A, willing, or B, wanting to come on the channel when the dominant production is coming from one political party?
I would say that's even more reason to come on the channel.
Okay.
I would encourage that. We would encourage that.
In terms of the money issue, Farage has declared £585,000 in fees from GB News since becoming an MP in July of 2024. If an advertiser comes to you and is concerned, saying, maybe we'd be interested in advertising, but I don't feel comfortable with, an MP taking money through us.
Yep. No, look. So I've had really good advertising conversations and media agency conversations. So there are a couple of rather well-known newspapers in this country which feature sometimes the very same, including sitting prime ministers, writing articles in newspapers. That hasn't, I'm going to go back to my week ago, that hasn't caused a resistance from us as advertisers. We still are comfortable because they're delivering the audience. This is the good, it's the good audience that we want. It's the great debate that we want. And they actually add a lot of value.
Why would an advertiser?
Yeah.
I mean, so that you're paying Farage through money that advertisers are being spending.
I haven't got that back from people, genuinely. I've got the political leaning is not the issue. I mean, come on. I mean, we don't get into, as an advertiser position, we don't get into, whether we think that Jeremy Clarkson should be earning money or whether Piers Morgan should be earning money because,
Well, they're not sitting MPs.
No. Well, you're suggesting is that people disagree with their politics, so therefore they don't want to be...
No, I'll get on to that question. That's a separate question. I'm just suggesting it could be Keir Starmer. It doesn't have to be Nigel Farage. Why would an advertiser feel comfortable with their money eventually ending up in the paycheck of a sitting politician?
So the advertisers are going to advertise in specific verticals and spaces that are safe for them. And it's pretty ordinary in any newspaper, any media brand that has contentious news. For example, most of the war at the moment makes most advertisers exclude anything from current affairs, and that's quite normal. And what you do as an advertiser is you invest in the audience, and you invest in the audience in a safer part of where it is. When I say safer, it means in areas where you are confident about the content's going to be. And that doesn't just affect this channel or the website or the TikTok, etc. It affects everything. So the way we tend to buy, as an industry, the way we tend to buy these sorts of environments is celebrity, sport, royalty, lifestyle, those kinds of verticals, and we actually generally avoid current affairs.
Right. Well, That brings me to an interesting question, because when you mentioned newspapers, I've talked to Don Williams at Mail Metro Media. Yeah. Daily Mail publishes a lot of very sensationalist, very controversial headlines.
Yeah.
When I've asked him this question over why should advertisers feel comfortable sitting against some of this content, his answer is usually, well, if they don't feel that comfortable, here's the sports section, or here's celebrity gossip.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit more comfortable, just to your point. My understanding of GB News is that there isn't really any of that the programming throughout the day goes between highly contentious political topics.
Sure. It's not that contentious for everyone. I think if we get ourselves out of our bubble, and I'm very much in that bubble myself, a lot of the topics being discussed are still of great interest to a lot of people in the country.
When you say they're not contentious for everyone, I mean, I don't want to run through an exhaustive list of all the things that have been said on GB News, but to take one, last winter, a GB News presenter, Josh Howie, compared LGBTQ plus people to pedophiles. You mentioned you are gay yourself. I mean,
yeah, which I would
pretty
find
contentious,
highly offensive.
Right.
And I do find offensive.
Right.
And that particular format was a panel show. Remember, it's live TV, so it's not edited. So have I got news views? Fantastic, but they have the opportunity to edit it before it goes out. So in a similar situation, comedians were invited on to share their thoughts and jokes. That was a joke that wasn't funny, and it sort of missed the mark. They apologized.
They did. I should note there was an apology.
Yeah.
There were also 70,000 complaints that were delivered to Ofcom by the Good Law Project, which is a nonprofit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, So broadcasters get lots of complaints. I mean, I think the two biggest broadcasters this week have got more complaints than ever before. That's the reality of live TV. And what I've spoken to everybody in the team before I joined and after I joined, they're very honest that they are committed to the Ofcom regulations, and they have chosen to be regulated. They didn't need to. They could have launched a YouTube channel.
I'm actually surprised that they decided to actually remain committed to Ofcom regulation, because as the new world sort of found, whether or not Ofcom is willing or able to enforce their rules, it seems like GB News is flouting them pretty constantly.
So I do know, and I can tell you quite honestly, that's not the intention. The intention is to provide great TV that people really want to watch, giving voice to people that feel they don't have the voice, but at the same time being honest enough that when we make a mistake, we put our hand up and we go, right, we got that wrong, we will apologize and fix it. And also, it's a new business. It's celebrating its 5th year anniversary this year. They're 5 years old.
Yeah, but it has a license. So if it has a license, then it needs to play by certain rules.
Correct, yeah.
And but it's pretty consistently not.
So it's been getting things wrong. It took Ofcom to court and actually had 2 of them overturned, and they were quite instrumentally overturned. And I think that's encouraging. But it's, the story that I've joined is about the trajectory. So mistakes have happened. Things have been learnt. And yes, those mistakes have been recent, not a problem. There is a significant increase in revenue. The viewership is there. It's bigger than Sky News. It's bigger than BBC News. And this is the inflection point to not necessarily to make change, but to solidify everything that, we've learned along the way and go forward as best is expected.
There are 2 more points that I want to mention sort of around this topic.
Yeah.
One is, and I promise I'll relate it to the commercial business.
Okay.
At the U.S. launch party of GB News.
Yes.
In September, it featured lots of people from the Trump administration.
Sure.
Caroline Leavitt, who's the White House spokesperson, said explicitly at the podium at the event that GB News, quote, shares the values this administration holds dear: free speech, that men cannot be women, secure borders. We don't want illegal aliens invading our countries. We want to protect the integrity, democracy, and culture that make our countries 2 of the greatest countries in the history of the world. And then GB News's chairman, Alan McCormick, later added, quote, Britain has been infected by a mind virus that sees no value in place, in family, in community, in love of country, and that these views have been reinforced by an establishment media that has suppressed any alternative viewpoints. Sort of similar to some degree of what you were referencing earlier. Yeah. Commercially or editorially, is it wise right now to be so openly aligned with the Trump administration?
I would say that I am not here to be a voice for the Trump administration. I am here for a commercial opportunity. And what they are doing is they are providing topics of interest that are interest to people in this country. And I am absolutely fine that not everybody agrees with everybody else. You know, I don't think the company is aligned with the Trump administration, but I think
even though the chairman and also Sir Paul Marshall spoke at that event as well, and there was a clear alignment of interests.
Yeah, but I think that I think there's enough interest in this country for Donald Trump to actually want to cover what he's saying.
There's a difference between interest and support.
Well, I don't necessarily think that any news outlet should be overtly supporting anyone.
Even by hosting MPs that are sitting in from a certain political party and giving them the platform to say everything that they want every night?
I think providing balance to the whole news story is a good thing.
Okay.
You know, I really want to debate my points in life, and I really want to have my points taken, and I ideally would love everybody to leave dinner or lunch agreeing with everything I say. But it is absolutely not part of society that everybody's going to agree with you.
The last one in terms of what I was described as pretty inflammatory rhetoric that I've heard recently on GB News came from a former Boris Johnson advisor. His name's Thomas Corbett Dillon. I think his real name's Craig Dillon. He claimed that ethnic minorities are threatening, quote, a white genocide in the UK. Look, I'm Jewish. I'm an immigrant myself. You're an immigrant, actually, as well, to this country, although I don't know if you have citizenship rights at this point.
I'm not from Lincolnshire, but I'm English, yeah.
Okay, so
grew up elsewhere.
I definitely am not from the country. I'm also Jewish, and when I hear that type of language, personally, I find it really quite frightening and alarming. And putting that in its own box, if I'm an advertiser, I don't think I would want my ad to come on right after, on the next break, after something like that was said, from an adjacency standpoint.
Sure. So
how would you walk through a client on that? Yeah,
it's a good point. So being adjacent to contentious topics is always going to be an issue. So it's our role to make sure we are able to provide brand safe spaces for advertisers, both in linear TV and all of digital platforms. You know, digital platforms are not easy, but we have a lot of technology to make sure that we can find the right topics, etc. From a linear perspective, there are programs. There are programs that are very clear. So, it's pretty ordinary for normal TV channels to have the news and then a wonderful woman presenting a lifestyle show that we all absolutely love. No one's going to be in the news section for the first 5 minutes, but we're all going to be in Lorraine, which is fantastic. That's important. I also went to Hebrew preschool for first 3 years of my life.
Okay.
I really do feel that it's just impossible to shut people up.
But not everyone comes on a television program.
Not everybody comes on a television program, and all of a variety of opinions actually are invited. And this is an advertising conversation, so I can't encourage the advertisers to do this. But one would encourage all parts of political parties to come on and share their opinions.
And you think that there's not a hostile environment to alternative views? Because whenever I've watched GB News, there is usually an attempt to have, if there is, one person, say, from the left.
Sure.
And that tends to get shut down, whatever their argument is, pretty quickly. And then, the rest of the sort of, I would describe, quite far right political argument then gets made in more detail.
Sure. So you'd probably have to give me a little bit more time to get into that.
Still, I think that the point, especially around advertising, is most advertisers are small c conservative. They are news avoidant to, frankly, shocking degree in terms of online, especially in terms of using keyword block lists, wanting to avoid politics. I think they're generally pretty terrified of seeing next to anything that could even make them look bad, that they're at least aware of. And TV, high attention medium, that would get a lot of people's attention if they sat next to it. So I'm aware Allwyn advertised on GB News.
Yep.
It was one of the largest advertisers to do it. Can you walk me through a little bit from the other end why you felt comfortable advertising on the platform?
So my job at Allwyn was to sell scratch cards and lottery tickets to everybody in the country. That means I need to find all potential buyers wherever they are. One of the bad things to do in marketing is to segment too much. So if you do a psychographic segmentation like yummy mummies and cool dads and all that kind of stuff, we know from marketing science that that's just not going to work. You need to have broad reach all the time. And broad reach means diverse sets of media. Now, usually when somebody like me speaks about diverse sets of media, you think about Attitude or, sort of minority publications. What it means for me is we run columns, practically speaking, of different kind of segments of society, however they possibly can get. And one of the things that Allwyn did so brilliantly, we did, is we identified that the previous license holder of the National Lottery in the UK was aiming after an 18-plus audience. They weren't looking how far they were doing on everybody else. And we were having a lower reach and a lower awareness and a lower sales amongst every possible diversity piece you could possibly think of, even Wales, an actual whole country. And so therefore, we were always looking to make sure, have we got absolutely everybody? Is there a group of people who we haven't got for whatever reason, because people are different, they consume media in their different ways, and what can we prop up within the media schedule? So GB News, as with Allwyn, as with a lot of advertisers, a conscious decision to reach an audience which just generally isn't as well reached elsewhere. At the same time, as advertisers, we want to have frequency. So it is possible in a lot of countries that you could pick one TV channel and maybe some outdoor, and you could definitely reach the entire nation. But we want to reach a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. The second part is about category entry points. So we want, as advertisers, we want you to think about our beer, think about our lottery tickets, think about our bank account when you're in time, spaces, and places when you are considering or associated with the category. So yesterday was a beautiful sunny day in London. So in my old beer days, I would want to be in media environments which associate you with good sun, etc., so that when you do actually go to the pub this evening or this weekend, that'll come to mind. The other piece is that it's an irrational fear of news. Sure, if there's a major international conflict, which is absolutely disastrous,
like the one happening right now,
you will want to avoid, the normal broadcast news slot, and it's whether you're allowed to or not, it's just inappropriate to be in that particular space. However, so I was on the Newsworks. We did the awards, but I was trying to remember, it was about 3 years ago. I was the chairman of the jury, and I spoke a lot about, from a news perspective, how we need to be investing more in news, because it is very, very engrossing. It's incredibly high attention, and it's an important part. And I think, so we have website and app and big social, which covers news as well. And it's depressing to see advertisers pull out of what is essentially some of the most newsworthy. I mean, these things are called newspapers. It's sad to see whitelists, and I mean from an entire news industry perspective, having whitelists that just remove all of the news, when in actual fact that's the thing that people pick the thing up to read.
Especially even around times of conflict, more people are reading news and tuning in. So if you would think about, is this an opportunity to reach more audiences? Maybe there's appropriate versions of placements for that. Yeah. I'm sure that the editors at news organizations would make a decision on whether or not they even want advertising running against something or not.
Yeah, and there's times when advertising is just not allowed, and that's absolutely fine. But the entire news publication or the news channel actually does better overall, because these things are sticky. People continue flipping the newspaper. People continue watching the TV channel.
From a GB News perspective, you mentioned sort of when you were at Allwyn wanting to make sure you were reaching every audience possible in the UK. Are there not other ways to reach the audiences that GB News services without going and advertising on GB News? Thinking if I'm an advertiser that's not interested in being against, from a brand safety or affinity perspective, being against GB News, couldn't they surely just go and do local out-of-home targeting or
absolutely
drop mail?
It is absolutely a possibility in this country to remove any media partner from a plan. And I can tell you that many times in the last 20 years, I've removed the biggest TV channel off the plan completely for trading reasons, and it has been possible to get by. So if I go back to 20 years in the UK, we had at Diageo, we had a fairly big trading conversation, and the agency helped us understand that it is possible to pause this for 3 months. It's going to cost you a little bit of money, not a lot, surprisingly. So every single media owner out there, as a media person, again, the thing that's most offensive is when a media owner comes to you and says, "Why aren't you spending with us? We are just one. We're one of the magazines you should be spending with." No, that's not how we kind of make the decision. We make the decision because they're, and I don't think people make the decision quite so much on political or contentious content basis as we tend to think they do. I would say my experience is it's way more about reach, attentive reach, and trust within the media brand. So being very direct about this, GB News being only 5 years old, has had to find its way. And I do believe that this is the inflection point, and it has found its way to be able to reassess that with mostly media agencies, but also with advertisers, in that we're able to take that trajectory going forward of the reach and provide those spaces which are safe.
Mm-hmm. I just want to put a fine point, put some figures against the inflection point that you've mentioned, just so people listening are aware. So according to Barb figures, GB News has beaten both BBC News and Sky News in average audience and audience share in 7 of the last 8 months. Mm-hmm. It still lags competitors in terms of total reach and digital following. So that to me sort of suggests that there's a relatively niche but expanding pool of viewers compared to other broadcasters. The business keeps losing money. Mm-hmm. Annual losses narrowed last year to 22 million, but cumulatively GB News has lost 131.5 million since its founding in 2021. Mm-hmm. Total revenue last year was 26 million, of which ad revenue grew 42% to 14.2 million. I think I've got all those numbers correct. So when you say this is at an inflection point, still losing money, do you have a remit to get this into the green within the next year? And if so, what's your strategy for growing ad revenue more than 42% year on year?
Absolutely. Well, good question. So the losses are getting lower. So revenue is increasing. That very, very much so double-digit growth in revenue, which I've got my fingers into, is an indication of more and more advertisers coming on board. There are direct advertisers, mostly. What is not yet come on board is tier 1 advertisers, so our top 50, maybe even top 10.
Except for Allwyn.
And some others.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be unfair to me to list them all, but
sure.
There's a good handful, but the majority are not yet on. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it's a very ordinary thing for us as a media planner to say, this thing called MTV is new. We'll see how it goes. And you can tell me it's got 1 million viewers. That's great, but I'll just see how it goes. It's not going to hurt me. It's not going to hurt any media planner to not put the new thing on the schedule. It is sometimes difficult to test it. So what we're going to do? So we've got increasing indication from advertisers that they are willing to advertise. We have got case studies from current advertisers who are buying sponsorships and regular advertising on the TV channel that they have had good returns. We've got really good case studies. We have feedback from the industry generally saying that so there's the media agency industry saying that they had made an assessment 2 or 3 years ago and they had decided it's a wait and see, and that they agree that this is potentially That's why I'm here, is to raise the profile and say, listen, this is an opportunity to reassess. And I can tell you that a lot of agencies are actually actively reassessing the opportunity. We have quite a few advertisers, large advertisers, who are being very open and honest and saying they're also waiting to see if other large advertisers come on board. So I think the trajectory on viewership, which you mentioned, is it's growing constantly. The one number which I really liked is when I met them at the end of December. So I resigned from a previous company at the Christmas party in December. And then I met these people within the next I met many companies within the next 2 weeks over a year, and they told me they had 4.5 million TikTok followers, which I thought was really impressive. Because a really close friend of mine invited me to the launch of their TikTok channel 3 years ago, and it's now absolutely massive. So the GB News one has grown from 4 odd to 2.5 odd. Well, the number was impressive, but it wasn't what it is now. It's now 4.5 million followers on TikTok, which is, you can see something happening there, and I can see the growth opportunity. So I'm really confident about the radio's growing even more than the TV. I'm really confident about the growth. We're not talking about the biggest TV broadcast in the country. This is not what we're talking about. But it is it's an audience which is growing, and I'm quite confident behind that. What I need to do, and what I am quite confident that I can do, is make sure that the trajectory that we're taking is in the right direction and is in a suitable direction for advertisers to have trust in both the TV channel and all of the other content. That means providing brand safe opportunities to advertise. So particularly digital, making sure that all of those normal things that we would expect a brand safe environment to have are available, regardless of whether the advertiser has them themselves, because sometimes they would. So my last 2 companies, we would have happily done them ourselves, but as a media owner, you need to provide that. So that means offering specific verticals, etc. Secondly, is making sure that the definition between the shows and what is on air is absolutely crystal clear to everybody. What is news, what is political commentary, what is opinion, and what is debate. So that we can identify these are the places and spaces where you can be very confident for your particular category. Again, not every category even wants to be in different areas. So clearly, ones that cover weather would be interested from a travel perspective, but not necessarily everybody's interested in weather. And I have a full commitment from the business that they know where they want to be, and where they want to be is respected by advertisers commercially. And, without getting into the numbers, because those numbers are obviously true, you can see that by unlocking major advertisers, it would definitely be going in the region that people would expect.
I mean, what I hear is almost not that you have any control over the editorial output, but in terms of defining what different types of editorial output look like, that would be helpful to your position in terms of saying, we're going to launch a sports vertical, or we're going to launch a weather vertical, or because that then provides the opportunity for advertisers in the same way as when I referenced the Daily Mail earlier, that there are alternative options to get advertisers on board, that you actually feel like you need that.
Yeah. And the conversations that I've really enjoyed having. So again, I definitely didn't watch every single second of GB News in the last 3 months. Nobody, very few people have. Just the same as I haven't watched every single second of BBC, 2 in the last 6 months. But what I have learned is that they have instituted significant changes and improvements in the scheduling. And they are putting a lot of time and effort and resource into that under the guise of not my joining, but somebody like me joining from a commercial perspective, so that they're able to provide the kinds of programs where advertisers are confident and safe to advertise. And all of that hasn't been implemented in it yet. You can see more of it's coming along the way. I'm quite confident. I also would want to say, and I've said this to a few friends, it's a long game. You can't. This is not a situation of just having a chat with somebody from some big grocery store and saying, "Would you?" and they agree and it's done. That's not what we're doing here. We are making sure that all 250 people, because it is 250 people in every single advertiser decision. So there's some client people, some agency people, some just mixed in throughout, they've been heard. So my huge part of the next 2-3 months is just listening to everybody and understanding exactly what we need. So they've been heard and provided for and communicated with.
Are you looking after the U.S. commercial expansion?
Yes, we are. We are in the US and we are in the UK, and
you specifically will be tasked as well with commercial opportunity in the US.
Yes.
How do you view that market any differently?
So we will have to get into that in the future, because my first priority is going to be very clearly getting UK-based tier 1 advertisers confident on the platform. But as a media person, so the US is an incredibly exciting market. It really is. And I think there is a huge opportunity for English-based news in countries like the US and other English-speaking countries. The US is very exciting. It is very challenging. It is a different kind of news. It's kind of closer to the kind of news channels that GB News provides, which is a mixture of news and commentary and opinion. More so than a country like the UK, but and it's not unique at all. There's lots of countries in the world, Australia, etc., that we really kind of have that sort of engaging level of content, and I do believe there's a huge opportunity for that.
Widening out a little bit, I've heard you talk a lot about TV in the past and sort of the importance and power of TV and what is unique about TV. It's a market that's losing investment.
Yeah.
So within your small slice of the pie that you're looking to grow, that pie is shrinking potentially, or well, it has been. It's likely to continue to. How do you view the wider TV market? And then, so when you're going to pitch advertisers to sort of say, not only should you be reinvesting in us, but also probably reinvesting in the medium more generally?
So I believe and agree strongly with my friend Elliot that we're talking about total TV.
Elliot Millard at ThinkBox. Yeah,
Elliot at ThinkBox, and all the work that ThinkBox is doing, and other industry lobbying organisations like them, is that it's a bit of a weird thing in the UK that when we say TV, or a lot of media traders say telly, they mean the broadcast TV bought by ratings packages. Whereas in the US, this is not the way we talk about TV. We just talk about total TV, and a hell of a lot of it's streaming. And sometimes we throw different terms forward. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's CTV, etc. But essentially, from an advertiser perspective, we want to be on TV, and we understand as advertisers that some of that might be through a streaming service, some of that might be through a broadcast. We had to have this conversation 20 years ago about satellite versus terrestrial TV. And I think the importance for a media brand, particularly one that is on TV, is that it signals the confidence of the industry. So a lot less scrutiny of context and environment choice is applied to digital, because a computer does it for you and probably does it better than we do it, to be honest, with AI today. But we provide our own objective or subjective scrutiny to what we put on TV. So I think it's an important part to crack. But this is not a TV brand. This is a news brand. It has a social potential. It has a digital potential. It has an app potential. It has a radio station, and it has a news TV station. It also has YouTube as well. So the kinds of conversations that I should be having with media agencies and advertisers is, this is the full total package that we can offer you. Here is our data offering. Here is our influence offering. Here is what we can do with our socials, through your products, through branded content. Here's what we can also provide you through packages on radio and television. And as a media agency person, I would have always preferred to see that. The fact is, we might split it out later and say, listen, well, we're only taking that part or that part. It's a bit of a weird one in this industry to go to anybody and say, I literally just want to have a radio conversation with you.
What is the feedback you've heard so far? I mean, I know you've only been in the job a couple of days, from advertisers and agencies specific to GB News and all of its different types of opportunity. What are they worried about that maybe I haven't brought up?
Okay, so media agencies, not ad agencies, media agencies, and I've been speaking to them for over a month or two, is that this was a startup channel, and there were some challenges in the beginning based around the quality of the show as opposed to the content of the show. bearing in mind the wide variety of politics that advertisers advertise in. So that's not the blocker, is the feedback I get. That is not the blocker. The blocker is new brand, wait and see, and they're waiting for somebody like me to prove to them that the wait and see is over and it's being delivered.
And in terms of maintaining Ofcom standards, does that ever come up? Are they concerned to say, because I know TV, as you mentioned, highly regulated medium.
Yeah.
Trust is really important. GB News is part of Barb. That's great. I'm sure advertisers love to see like real figures. Not everyone working in the TV space is committing to that at the moment.
Yeah.
But in terms of also maintaining trust and respecting Ofcom, does that worry advertisers at all?
The same conversation that you had with me, I've had several times before. I mean, you're a little bit more direct than most people, which is great.
That's my job.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. And it's funny enough, so if I may say, it's a bit of an English thing to talk around the topic. So to not say what you really need to say, and it's taken a few conversations with a couple of people to actually get. And my real takeout is, I didn't realize it wasn't the politics. I now realize, and I've had several conversations, I now realize it was literally just startup channel. Professionalism quality right in the beginning wasn't where it should be. It is massively better now. Nobody necessarily knows that, and that's my job to make sure people do know that. And yeah, it could be time to reassess. Obviously, the media agency conversation comes with a massive, and you need to reassure the advertisers of the same thing. And I think out of respect to the great work that the people that I admire, which is the media owners that I've worked through my career, they've been very, very good about having both conversations at the same time, because, essentially media owners are selling to media agencies. They're buying it in their principal, forget principal media, they're buying it themselves. They're committing financially to it. Their clients don't sort of bankroll them. That's not how it happens. So
that is principal media.
So principal media,
or you're talking about just a trading deal.
Yeah, but even as a media agency, when you book media on behalf of a client, you are still legally obliged to pay whether or not the client pays you. And I owned a media agency, so I had a situation where a client hadn't provided the company that I owned with a purchase order, even though the ad was flighting that particular week. That's stressful times. So in that situation, you go, well, actually, I'm not an agency. I literally am accountable for all this money. So to be decent to them as a decent partner, you've got to assist them in making sure that the people that they serve, their clients, are equally done. Now, I've been around for 30 years in this industry, and I've been a client for sort of 15, 20 years of that. There is things that I can tell you that media owners get terribly wrong with understanding what it is to reassure a client.
Like what?
So, we went through an interesting thing about 20 years ago where there was an assumption that you could wine and dine people until they sign. And, because it looked like it worked. And this is a common marketing issue. So, in selling chocolates, you run a discount and you sell more chocolates and it looks like it works. But we know from marketing science and evidence that actually that's not as good as constantly nudging people along the way. So it's not a comparison to this, but same sort of thinking that what an advertiser needs is confidence that the business decisions they're making are the right decisions, and that, quite frankly, when they are seen within the organization, they'll be respected for the decisions that they've been made. You do need to have direct relationships with everybody to be able to convey that trust. And, one of the things that I've enjoyed in being in a media agency and being at an ad agency is that I have always had personal contact with media owners, so that when something goes really, really wrong, sometimes we make a mistake or they make a mistake, somebody around us is able to pick up a phone. I have so many media owners on my WhatsApp from the last year, so that we can go, there's something really serious happened. Can you help? And it's an immediate thing. And I think that's really, really important. That's not to disrespect the primary relationship is between the media agency and the advertiser, but it's to be there to support both wherever they need.
So will you be wining and dining after you were wined and dined, or is that, I guess, what's the sales strategy actually that you're going to be trying to implement?
Yeah, so listen, the sales strategy is to make sure that we sell our TV via the fantastic team via Sky.
Yeah.
And they do an amazing job. They represent a wide range of channels, and they're absolutely brilliant at it. They have got excellent relationships with the media agencies and excellent relationships with the advertisers. Just like some of their other third-party channels, we will be there to assist them to make sure that we are reinforcing our offer. So you can expect to see an upfront from us. You can expect to see client dinners from us. You can expect to see, a couple of pints and a Nando's, so that we get that relationship going, so that the media agency people and the clients know that should they choose, and it's their choice at some later stage, to put this particular media brand, GB News, onto their schedule, they have got the relationships and the contents to either get something quickly, make something happen. The practicalities of media agencies is sometimes they're under huge pressure to get a proposal in time. And I mean, as a media agency, the worst thing in the world is trying how can I figure out who to speak to at these people to get them to do something? So we will be doing that. We'll be going out into the industry and we're supporting. And then the other thing is, the media owners, I hope I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody, but the media owners are there to form the network of the society that we're in, the media society that we're in. They are there. They know more about the agencies than the agencies know about each other. So one of the really great things is if an agency wants to know something about somebody else from another agency, the first person they phone is a media owner. For hiring, or even for pitches and things like that, and they're really fantastic. And come to pitches again, a huge amount of the pitch work is done by the media owners for the agencies. That's their entire strategy, everything. But they are required to do a hell of a lot of work. So I do see a very important role that media owners can provide within the media agency world and the media owner world of providing that network and allowing everybody to get together. So bringing around the kind of networking opportunities that people can go. So your company runs the best of all of the events, and essentially those are supported in the biggest way by the media owners, and that provides random advertisers like me the opportunity to meet people that I generally would have never met. And I must say, every single time I've been on a panel for any of the ad-wanted events, any single time I've been in the green room, or any single time I've managed to talk to somebody, it's always been followed up, and it's followed up as a contact for life. And I want to be part of that. And a huge part of why I personally wanted to do this, become a media owner, is to be far more significantly involved in our UK, mostly London media industry.
Last question.
Yeah.
I know you're a highly opinionated man. I haven't asked you. I mean, we could have a whole separate discussion about the state of media planning and strategy.
Oh, yes.
So I'll try and just put a pin on it.
Mm-hmm.
What's your big challenge to current media strategists? What's something that people are getting wrong that you would like to see corrected?
Yes. So our obligation as media professionals is to understand marketing science. I am concerned that there is a lot of bullshit being shared by different people with different agendas, which is being followed without understanding marketing science. And I think whether you're at a media agency or a media owner, but media agency and an advertiser, it's a tough journey because you're getting all of this consulting work done on you. And it's always based on somebody else's incentive or goal. So I mentioned ad agencies that I've worked at. I've worked at media agencies. Those are two different goals, completely different goals. The one wants to produce amazing work in an audiovisual format, ideally, and the other wants to, I can't summarize what media agencies want to do because my heart's too close to it, but I would say want to do good in the world, but that's what we kind of say. But they're differing motivations. So I think what we need, and we need better understanding of marketing science. We don't need to send people on a 2-week online course. Can you imagine if I told you that the bridge we just built in Hammersmith was built because we sent some person on a 6-week internet course a mini engineering course. This is not the solution. I'm sorry. You also don't have to hire people who have got advanced degrees in media planning. That's also not necessary. But there are plenty of good, well-known institutions that provide excellent case studies, information, evidence. So my last two companies, we were a member of the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. It is an excellent investment. Too many companies join, they don't leverage it properly. And that's the kind of thinking that we need to use. I mean, I studied marketing 30 years ago. I think, 30 years ago. So I can't be expected. At the time, that was Kotler. So we read the whole Kotler. And that has been completely refuted. So I don't expect everybody to have started off with an Ehrenberg Bass mentality, and they're not the only marketing science institute in the world, but to go out and seek that information.
Get educated.
Get educated, get re-educated, be respectful, and always question any piece of research that's sent to you, and just be clear. Like, if it comes from I don't know, the board that's promoting radio, it's not wrong, but remember that they're promoting radio. Because tomorrow you'll see a chart from Newsworks which will show you that newspapers is in the top right hand corner, and got to follow that.
Gotcha. Well, we'll leave it there. Ross, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for your time today.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, Trisonic. You can find all our episodes on the podcast platform of your choice or on our website at uk.themedialeader.com. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified of our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest news stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.